He was known everywhere as the best pianist alive. People traveled from distant cities just to hear him play. In every concert hall, his name was announced with excitement, and the audience would cheer even before he touched the piano keys. His music was flawless, each note perfectly timed, every piece full of emotion. Critics called him a genius, and fans believed no one could ever match his talent. He had spent his whole life practicing, starting as a child, and now, in his prime, he felt unstoppable. Every morning, he woke up early, often before the sun rose. The first sound in his house was the soft echo of piano keys as he played alone. He believed that only by pushing himself constantly could he stay at the top. There were no shortcuts for him, no laziness, and no room for mistakes. People admired his dedication, but some said he seemed too focused, almost obsessed. He did not notice their comments. His life was the piano, and the piano was his life. He lived in a house filled with pianos. Each one was carefully tuned, shining under the soft light, ready for him to play. He had a grand piano in the main room, a smaller upright one in the study, and even a piano in his garden room where sunlight fell on the keys in the morning. Friends sometimes joked that he spent more time with his pianos than with people. He would smile politely but never changed his routine. He preferred the company of music. In public, he had a calm, confident presence. When he walked into a concert hall, the room seemed to change. The audience quieted instantly, their eyes on him. When he sat at the piano, he didn't just play notes. He told stories with each movement of his hands. Some said his music could make people laugh, cry, or feel like they were somewhere far away. Yet, behind this calm and confident exterior, there was a part of him that believed no one could ever reach his level. He had trained himself to be the best, and he wore that title like a crown. Competitions had come and gone, and he had won every one he entered. Judges often praised not just his skill, but his style. Other musicians respected him, but some were intimidated by him. They knew he was not someone to challenge lightly. In interviews, he would talk about dedication, about the importance of discipline and hard work. He rarely mentioned talent. He believed talent was nothing without effort, and he had spent every moment of his life proving it. His schedule was strict. Morning practice, afternoon lessons for young musicians he sometimes taught, evening concerts, and late-night improvisations when the house was quiet. He liked those nights best. No audience, no critics, no expectations. Just him and the music flowing freely. That was when he felt closest to the soul of the piano, when every note came from somewhere deep inside him. Those nights made him feel alive. Despite his fame, he lived a simple life. He did not chase luxury or fame for its own sake. He wore simple clothes, ate simple meals, and often walked alone in the park near his house, listening to the sounds of nature. Sometimes he would pause, watching birds fly or leaves fall, letting these small moments inspire him. He believed every experience could teach him something new about music. In his mind, music was not just performance. It was understanding life itself. People often asked him if he ever felt nervous before a performance. He would smile and say no, that fear had no place in his life. But inside, there was always a quiet tension before the first note. It was not fear of failure, but a deep respect for the music itself. Each piece was a challenge, a puzzle to solve, and even someone at his level had to approach it with care. He did not rush. He prepared, repeated, and practiced until he could feel the music in every fiber of his being. One day, a young musician approached him backstage after a concert. The young person's hands shook slightly, and the eyes were full of admiration. "How did you become so good?" they asked. The pianist looked at them and smiled softly. "Patience," he said. "Practice every day even when it is hard. Never stop learning. And most importantly, never play just for praise. Play for the music itself." The young musician nodded, inspired, but the pianist knew that very few could truly follow this path. It required more than talent. It required devotion and a willingness to set pride aside. As years passed, his reputation only grew. Every city wanted him to perform. Every festival wanted him to headline. People spoke of him as if he were untouchable, a musical legend walking among them. Yet, in quiet moments alone at the piano, he sometimes felt a strange emptiness. He had mastered technique, speed, and complexity, but occasionally he wondered if there was something he was missing, some depth he had not yet reached. He pushed the thought aside quickly, returning to his routine. There was always another piece to practice, another audience to impress, another day to prove that he was the best. He never expected anything could surprise him. Music was his world, and he knew every corner of it. Every scale, every composition, every rhythm felt familiar. People tried to challenge him, but he had an answer for everything. Even in improvisation, where creativity matters more than skill, he was unmatched. His fingers danced over the keys as if they had a life of their own, creating sounds that seemed impossible for ordinary humans to make. That was why everyone called him the best pianist alive. The audience loved him, and rightly so. Tickets sold out instantly. Fans traveled for hundreds of miles to see him play live. When the lights dimmed and he took his place at the piano, people held their breath, waiting for the magic to begin. And he delivered. Every performance was unforgettable, every note perfect. Critics wrote glowing reviews, calling him a genius, a master, a living legend. He had become more than a musician. He was an icon. But even in this world of praise and applause, he carried a quiet confidence bordering on arrogance. He believed no one could ever teach him anything new about music. He thought he had seen every possibility, played every variation, felt every emotion through the piano. And for a time, this belief seemed justified. Until the day a mysterious tune would appear, a melody unlike anything he had ever heard, one that would challenge everything he believed about himself and his music. But that day had not yet come, and for now, he continued to live in his perfect, precise world, the best pianist alive, untouchable, admired, and utterly confident. One evening, the pianist prepared for a special concert. It was held in a grand hall filled with golden chandeliers, polished wooden floors, and rows of velvet seats. The audience was buzzing with excitement, expecting another unforgettable performance. The pianist walked in as usual, carrying himself with calm confidence. People whispered about how they had waited months for this night. He nodded politely to the applause and took his place at the piano. The music began, flowing smoothly, powerful and delicate at the same time. Every note was precise, every chord perfect. The audience was mesmerized, and as usual, the pianist felt the familiar rush of control. Music was his kingdom, and tonight he ruled it fully. He played his most challenging pieces, moving from soft, tender passages to bold, dramatic crescendos. Each moment was carefully crafted to show his skill, his mastery, and his understanding of every nuance in the music. But tonight, something was different. In the corner of the hall, a figure quietly entered, moving through the shadows without drawing attention. No one noticed at first except the pianist, who had a strange sense that someone was watching him differently. He glanced briefly, but the figure quickly disappeared into the darkness. For a moment he felt an unusual chill, but he shrugged it off. The music continued, as flawless as always, yet a small curiosity lingered in his mind. After the performance, as the audience cheered wildly, the mysterious figure remained seated. People began leaving the hall, talking about the pianist's brilliance, but he could not stop noticing that one seat, the same seat, where someone stayed behind. The curiosity grew. Who was this person, and why were they not clapping like everyone else? There was something unusual about their presence, calm yet observant, and it made him feel slightly unsettled. After the concert, the pianist mingled with a few close friends and patrons, but his eyes kept wandering to that empty corner where the figure had been sitting. When the crowd had thinned, he finally approached. The figure stood quietly, waiting. The pianist studied them carefully. There was no arrogance, no attempt to impress, only a calm seriousness that felt unusual in a world so filled with praise and recognition. "Do you play the piano?" the pianist asked casually, expecting a polite shake of the head. The figure nodded slowly, a quiet confidence in the gesture. The pianist smiled slightly, amused. "Would you like to try the piano?" he asked, jokingly. imagining a simple tune played with clumsy hands. He expected a brief hesitation or nervousness, but the figure simply nodded and approached the grand piano without any fear or hesitation. The audience, or what remained of it, watched with curiosity as the mysterious person took a seat. At first, the pianist thought this would be nothing more than a polite display, a beginner playing softly to show respect. But as the figure's fingers touched the keys, a sound unlike anything the pianist had ever heard filled the room. It was soft, hesitant at first, almost as if testing the air, but then it began to flow with a strange confidence. The melody was unfamiliar, yet it seemed to reach deep into the hearts of those who listened. The pianist stopped, mid-thought, mid-motion. He had been expecting simple notes, a polite acknowledgement of his skill, but this tune was different. It was subtle, emotional, and filled with a depth he had never encountered. The notes were not flashy or complex, but they carried a feeling that transcended technical skill. He realized immediately that this was not an ordinary performance. Something about the tune made him sit up straighter, pay attention in a way he rarely allowed himself to do with others. The audience, too, was captivated. People who had seen his concerts hundreds of times felt a strange hush, a quiet awe. This was not a competition. It was a revelation. The music seemed to tell a story without words, a story that moved from sadness to hope, from longing to quiet peace. The pianist felt a strange sensation in his chest. He had heard many musicians, some extraordinary, some talented, but he had never experienced this. The melody was unfamiliar, yet it touched something deep inside him. He watched the hands on the keys, how they moved effortlessly yet deliberately. The fingers danced, yet they were never rushed. Every pause, every note, every chord had purpose. The pianist felt a mixture of admiration and disbelief. He had always thought of himself as someone who had mastered every nuance of the piano. Yet, here was someone who was not just playing music, but creating an experience that he had never imagined possible. The music continued, and the pianist's pride began to shift into curiosity. How had this person learned such music? Was it the result of years of secret practice, or something deeper, almost instinctive? He leaned forward slightly, trying to understand, to analyze the technique and the emotion behind the notes. Yet, the more he tried to dissect it, the more it eluded him. The tune was alive in a way that resisted explanation. As the final notes floated through the hall, the audience remained silent for a moment, stunned by the unexpected beauty. Then, a soft wave of applause began, growing slowly, respectfully. People were not clapping for technical skill, nor for fame or recognition. They were clapping for something rare. Pure emotion delivered through music. The pianist felt an unfamiliar feeling rising within him, a mixture of humility and astonishment. He had never experienced such a reaction to another performer, not in all his years of playing for hundreds of audiences. He approached the mysterious musician carefully with a new awareness. He realized that tonight, something had shifted. The world he had known, where he was always the best, suddenly felt different. There was someone who had arrived quietly, almost unnoticed, and had played a tune that changed everything. He felt a strange excitement and, at the same time, a humility that he rarely allowed himself to feel. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. "I have never heard anything like that. Who taught you to play like that?" The figure smiled faintly, calm and composed. There was no arrogance, no intention to impress, only the quiet knowledge that this music was not about proving anything to anyone. It was about expressing something deep and personal. The pianist nodded slowly, feeling a mix of respect and curiosity. He realized that the night had just begun, and that this encounter would mark the start of something new. For the first time in his life, he felt challenged, not by technical skill, but by the depth and soul of music itself. The mysterious tune had entered his world, and he could feel that it would change him forever. He had been the best pianist alive, but tonight, he understood that there was more to music than mastery alone, and that perhaps someone had finally arrived who could teach him a lesson he would never forget. The following day, the pianist could not stop thinking about the mysterious tune. He walked through his house in silence, his fingers twitching as if they wanted to play, but his mind kept replaying the music he had heard the night before. It was different from anything he had ever experienced. He realized that it was not just skill that made the music extraordinary. It was emotion, depth, and a strange sense of storytelling that felt alive. He went to the piano in his study and began to play, trying to recreate what he had heard. But every attempt fell short. The notes were technically perfect, but they lacked the soul and subtle beauty of the mysterious melody. The pianist felt something he had never felt before: frustration. He had faced many challenges in his life, but this was unlike anything. No matter how fast or precise his fingers moved, the feeling could not be captured. Curiosity mixed with determination. He needed to see the musician again, to understand where such music came from. He reached out to the concert hall, hoping that someone knew who the figure was. To his surprise, no one could identify them. It was as if the person had appeared only for that moment, played the music, and vanished without leaving a trace. The pianist felt a shiver of both intrigue and unease. He had never encountered anyone like this, someone who could challenge him not by competition but by the purity of their art. Later that evening, he visited a small, quiet cafe near the city. He often came there to listen to local musicians and observe how others played. But today, the cafe felt different. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the tune, analyzing every chord, every pause, every subtle inflection. He realized that he had never experienced music as something living and breathing, something that could move people without relying on speed or complexity. The mysterious tune had opened a door in his understanding, one he was eager to explore. While sitting at a corner table, he noticed a young musician practicing quietly on a small upright piano in the cafe. The notes were simple, but there was a sense of care and attention in the way the person played. It reminded him, in a small way, of the melody from the night before. He approached, listening carefully. The young musician looked up, surprised by the sudden attention. But there was no fear in their eyes, only calm concentration. The pianist asked gently, "Have you ever heard the tune that was played at the concert last night?" The young musician shook their head. "No, sir," they replied. "But I would love to learn about it." The pianist realized that it was not about teaching someone to copy the melody. It was about understanding the feeling behind it, the life that lived inside each note. He decided to spend the afternoon with the young musician, sharing ideas, discussing emotion in music, and exploring how to express something beyond the technical aspects of playing. As they worked together, the pianist felt a mix of admiration and humility. The young musician did not play to impress, did not focus on speed or difficulty, but on connection. Each note had purpose, each pause held meaning. It reminded him of the mysterious figure from the concert. For the first time, he saw that music could exist outside of titles, outside of skill competitions, and that true artistry was about communicating feeling that words could not express. The day passed quickly. By evening, the pianist realized he had learned more from the young musician than he had from many professional peers. He felt a quiet respect, and an awareness that his understanding of music had been incomplete. There was a depth he had never explored, a way of touching hearts that could not be measured by applause or awards. The mysterious tune from the night before began to make sense. It was not about being the best. It was about being real, about honesty in music. He left the cafe and walked through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting on wet pavements. He thought about the upcoming concerts and performances, but now with a new perspective. Music was no longer just about demonstrating skill. It was about sharing something true. The mysterious figure had taught him this lesson without even speaking. The idea that someone could play with such quiet authority had humbled him, and he felt a strange excitement. He wanted to learn more, to find that person, to understand the story behind the music. Back at his home, he sat at his grand piano and tried once again to play, not for perfection, not to impress, but to explore feeling. The notes flowed differently now, slower, more thoughtful, searching for expression rather than speed. He felt a connection with the music that had been missing before. Each chord resonated with him in a new way, and for the first time, he understood that being the best was not about being the fastest or the most flawless. It was about touching hearts, about finding the life within every note. He thought about the audience from the previous night. They had reacted not to technical skill but to honesty, to emotion that was larger than the room itself. He understood why they had been silent at the end, why the applause had been hesitant and reverent. The music had reached somewhere inside them that he had never reached before, and now he wanted to reach it himself. The mysterious figure had shown him that there was a different level of artistry, one that required humility, patience, and openness to the unknown. Days turned into weeks, and the pianist continued his search for the mysterious musician. He spoke with concert hall staff, asked regular visitors, and even traveled to nearby cities, hoping to find someone who knew who they were. But the figure seemed to exist only in that single night, as if they were a shadow passing through the world. The mystery only made him more determined. He began to focus not on proving himself, but on learning, experimenting, and letting music guide him in new ways. During this period, he composed small pieces inspired by what he had heard. The tunes were simple, but they carried a depth that felt honest. He shared them with close friends and students, and even without grand performances, he noticed that people responded differently. They did not just hear the music, they felt it. The pianist realized that the mysterious tune had changed him, not just as a performer, but as a person. He was more patient, more aware, and more willing to listen, not just to music, but to the world around him. Finally, one evening he returned to the same concert hall. The stage was empty, the chairs lined up neatly, and the air held the familiar anticipation of performance. He sat at the piano alone and played. The notes flowed with a new understanding. They were not fast or technically overwhelming, but they carried emotion, honesty, and life. As he played, he imagined the mysterious figure listening, and for the first time he felt a sense of humility and gratitude. He understood that music was not a competition, but a journey, and that tonight, he was beginning a new chapter of that journey. The day of the next big concert arrived, and the pianist felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had been practicing for weeks, not just to perform perfectly, but to explore new emotions and depths in his music. The mysterious tune from the previous concert still echoed in his mind, pushing him to approach the piano differently. He had changed, slowly but surely, understanding that true mastery was about more than skill. It was about connection, expression, and humility. When he entered the grand concert hall, the room was buzzing with anticipation. Critics, fans, and fellow musicians filled the seats, all waiting for him to perform. He could feel their eyes on him, expecting brilliance, expecting perfection. But tonight, he did not want to play for approval or admiration. He wanted to play for music itself, to let his fingers tell the story he had discovered over the past weeks. As he prepared to sit at the grand piano, a murmur ran through the audience. A figure appeared at the back of the hall, the same mysterious musician from before. No one knew who they were, and the pianist realized immediately that this was the moment he had been anticipating. The stranger had come again, quietly, without fanfare, and their presence alone made the air in the room feel different. He felt a mix of excitement and challenge, an unfamiliar sensation that made his heart beat faster. The concert began, and the pianist played with all the care and emotion he had cultivated since the last encounter. Each note was thoughtful, deliberate, carrying the feelings he had been learning to express. The audience responded differently this time, leaning in, listening, feeling the music rather than just admiring it. He could sense the difference in their energy, and it encouraged him to go further, to explore places in music he had never dared to before. Midway through the performance, he felt a sudden urge to take a risk. He improvised, moving away from the familiar pieces, following instinct and emotion instead of carefully memorized notes. The music swelled and softened, rose and fell, carrying the audience along in a journey that was new, unexpected, and deeply moving. He felt a strange connection with the mysterious figure at the back of the hall, as if they were guiding him, silently urging him to reach deeper, to play from the heart rather than the mind. The mysterious musician rose and approached the piano. The audience gasped softly, unsure what was about to happen. The pianist's hands did not falter. They moved with confidence, yet his mind raced with curiosity. Who was this person? Why had they returned? And most importantly, what would happen when they played? He had never faced a challenge like this before. This was not about competition in the traditional sense, but about being confronted with something extraordinary, something beyond his control. The figure sat down at a smaller piano placed to the side of the stage. They did not speak, did not acknowledge the audience, only focused silently on the keys. The pianist watched, his heart pounding. Then the music began. At first, the notes were gentle, almost hesitant, but gradually they evolved into something rich, emotional, and surprisingly powerful. It was not fast, not complex in a technical sense, but it carried weight, story, and life. The audience was mesmerized, unable to look away. The pianist felt an unfamiliar tension. He wanted to respond, to play something extraordinary, something that would show he was still the best. He began to play again, faster, more dramatically, demonstrating the skill and technique that had earned him his fame. Yet, he realized almost immediately that the music was different now. The mysterious tune lingered in his mind, guiding him, challenging him, and making him feel that no matter how brilliant he played, something deeper was at work. For the first time in his life, he felt doubt. Not fear, but a quiet, persistent recognition that there was someone else whose understanding of music went beyond him. The music from the side piano was not intended to overpower or compete. It was a living, breathing expression, and it humbled him. He realized that true artistry was not about speed, precision, or complexity. It was about honesty, connection, and the courage to be vulnerable in front of others. The two pianos continued in this silent conversation. Notes rose and fell, intertwined and contrasted, creating a dialogue that spoke without words. The pianist found himself listening as much as playing, allowing the music to guide him rather than his ego. Every time he thought he had control, the melody from the side piano surprised him, taking him to a place he had never explored. He felt exhilaration and humility together, a rare combination that left him both challenged and inspired. The audience watched in awe, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. This was not just a performance. It was a moment of transformation, a meeting of minds and hearts through the universal language of music. The hall was silent except for the notes, and in that silence, the pianist understood something essential. This was not about proving who was better. It was about the beauty of sharing, of creating, of allowing music to flow without boundaries or expectations. Minutes passed like hours, yet the pianist felt time stretching, each note an eternity, each chord a revelation. He noticed how the mysterious figure played with a balance of precision and emotion, how every pause and every accent mattered. It was as if the music itself was alive, shaping him, teaching him, guiding him towards something he had not yet known. For the first time, he played not to impress, not to dominate, but to connect, to communicate, to feel. As the performance drew to a close, the pianist realized that he had changed. His fingers moved differently, more gracefully, more thoughtfully. The music carried a depth he had never achieved alone. When the final notes faded, there was a silence that felt heavier than applause. Then, slowly, the audience rose, clapping not just for skill, but for the shared experience, for the beauty that had unfolded in the hall. It was unlike any response he had ever received. He looked at the mysterious musician, who nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the journey they had shared. There was no need for words. The pianist understood that this was not a rivalry, but a lesson, a gift. The music had humbled him, not by competition, but by revealing a truth he had not yet grasped, that mastery alone was not enough. True artistry required openness, humility, and a willingness to let music lead the way. After the concert, the pianist stayed behind to speak with the mysterious figure. They talked quietly, sharing thoughts about music, life, and the emotions that drove them. He realized that talent alone meant little without heart, and that the journey of learning never truly ends. The figure spoke little, but each word carried weight and meaning, reinforcing the lessons hidden within their melody. That night, as the pianist returned home, He sat at his grand piano once more. He played not for an audience, not for fame, but for himself and for the music that had taught him humility. The notes flowed naturally, filled with emotion and understanding. He knew that he had been challenged, humbled, and inspired in a way that would change every performance from that day forward. He had been the best pianist alive, but now he had begun to understand something more profound. The true power of music was not in mastery, but in its ability to touch hearts and transform souls. The next morning, the pianist could not stop thinking about the previous night. The performance had left him both exhausted and exhilarated. He had been humbled in ways he never expected, but also inspired. Something about the mysterious musicians playing had opened a door inside him. He knew he could not ignore it. He had to understand more, had to learn where the music had come from and why it had affected him so deeply. He spent hours at his piano, experimenting with new compositions, trying to capture the feeling, the emotion, the life that had been present in the mysterious tune. But every attempt fell short. No matter how he played, he realized that the music could not be copied, only understood. It came from somewhere deeper than technique or practice. It was born of experience, of feeling, of a kind of honesty that he had rarely allowed himself to reach. Finally, he decided to seek out the mysterious musician. He asked at concert halls, music schools, and cafes, but no one seemed to know who the person was. They had not given their name, had left no contact, and yet their presence lingered in his mind like a shadow. Each passing day increased his desire to understand, not out of ego, but out of genuine curiosity and respect for what he had heard. One afternoon, he received an unexpected message. It was from the mysterious musician, inviting him to a quiet studio on the outskirts of the city. The pianist's heart raced as he prepared for the visit. He did not know what to expect, only that he needed to go, to see the person again, and perhaps finally understand the source of that extraordinary music. The studio was small but warm, filled with sunlight and the gentle smell of polished wood. There were pianos in every corner, each carefully maintained. The mysterious musician was there, waiting quietly. The pianist noticed how calm and focused they were, as if the world outside did not exist. When he entered, they offered a gentle nod, an unspoken greeting that felt respectful and sincere. "I wanted you to come here," the musician said softly. "There is something I think you need to understand about music, and about yourself." The pianist nodded, listening carefully. He realized that this was not just a lesson in playing, but a moment of learning about life, about humility, about the deeper meaning of art. The musician began to play, not for performance, but as a conversation. The notes were not flashy or complex, but they carried meaning and feeling. Each chord seemed to tell a story, and the pianist listened, captivated, realizing that he was experiencing something rare. Music that spoke directly to the soul. It was clear that the musician had spent years developing not only skill but a deep understanding of emotion, patience, and expression. After the piece ended, the pianist asked gently, "How did you learn to play like this?" The musician smiled faintly, a calm and quiet smile. "I was born into it," they said. "My family has a long history with music, and I learned not just to play, but to listen, to feel, to understand the life within each note. But talent alone is nothing. It is only when you pour your heart into the music, when you allow it to be honest, that it touches others." The pianist absorbed the words. He realized that he had spent much of his life chasing perfection, fame, and recognition. He had mastered the technical side of music but had often ignored the deeper connection. The mysterious musician had not come to compete or challenge him, but to show him what music could truly be, when approached with heart and honesty. They spoke for hours, sharing stories of music, life, and the lessons learned along the way. The musician spoke of struggles, of long hours of practice, of moments of doubt, and of discovering that music was not about proving oneself, but about connecting with others. The pianist felt a deep respect, understanding that what he had experienced at the concerts was not about who was better, but about sharing something real, something that could not be measured by skill alone. The musician then shared a personal story. As a child, they had often been underestimated, overlooked, and even mocked for their quiet demeanor and unusual approach to music. Yet, they persisted not for recognition, not for praise, but for the love of expression itself. Over time, they developed a style that was uniquely their own, one that touched people without needing to shout or perform tricks. The pianist listened intently, realizing the depth of patience, humility, and dedication required to reach that level. The conversation turned to the importance of vulnerability. When you play from the heart, the musician said, you open yourself up. It is scary, yes, because you cannot control how others respond. But it is also the only way to create music that matters, music that moves people. Talent alone will take you far, but it is humility and honesty that make you truly great. The pianist felt the weight of the words. He had never truly understood this before. For all his fame, he had not known the courage it took to let music speak without ego. The afternoon faded into evening, and the pianist realized that he had been changed. Not by competition, not by challenge, but by the quiet guidance of someone who had shown him another path. He understood that he had been the best in technical skill, but there were levels of artistry, depth, and expression he had yet to explore. The mysterious musician had not humbled him through speed or complexity, but through the living essence of music itself. Before leaving, the pianist thanked the musician sincerely. I have learned more from you than I have in all my years of performing, he said quietly. The musician smiled. Keep playing, but play from your heart. Let go of pride and listen. Music will guide you if you allow it. On his way home, the pianist felt a quiet joy. He realized that humility did not diminish his skill. It enhanced it. He thought about the concerts, the audience, and the countless hours he had spent chasing perfection. Now he understood that the true challenge was not to be the best, but to be honest, to touch hearts, and to find life in every note. That night, he returned to his grand piano and began to play. The notes flowed differently now, not for display, not for applause, but as a conversation with music itself. Each chord carried meaning. Each pause held emotion. For the first time, he felt completely connected, as if the piano, the music, and he were one. He understood that the mysterious musician had not just played a tune. They had shown him the path to a deeper understanding, a richer, more meaningful way to live and create. In the quiet of his house, he realized that the journey was far from over. The mysterious musician had given him a gift, and it was up to him to continue exploring, learning, and expressing. The pianist understood that mastery of technique was only the beginning, and that true greatness came from heart, humility, and the courage to let music speak for itself. For the first time, he felt not just skill, but wisdom, and a renewed purpose that would guide every note he played in the future. Weeks passed, and the pianist continued to practice with a new perspective. Every morning, he approached the piano with quiet focus, no longer concerned with being the fastest or most flawless. Instead, he played to feel, to express, to connect with the music itself. He experimented with melodies, exploring emotions he had previously ignored. The mysterious tune that had first humbled him now guided his journey, reminding him that music was more than a display of talent. It was a reflection of life, of human experience, of heart. Word began to spread that the pianist was returning to the stage, but this time something had changed. Critics and fans alike were curious. They had heard that his style had shifted, that his performances were now deeper, more expressive. Yet no one knew exactly what to expect. The pianist welcomed the uncertainty, feeling more alive than he had in years. He understood that true artistry lay not in meeting expectations, but in being authentic, in letting the music reveal his own growth and humanity. On the night of the performance, the grand concert hall was filled once more. People from far and wide had come to witness him play, but the atmosphere felt different. The pianist felt calm, not driven by pride, but by curiosity and anticipation. He walked to the piano, nodded to the audience, and took a deep breath. This time, there were no preconceived plans, no obsession with perfection. He simply let the music flow, allowing each note to express what words could not. The first chords filled the hall, soft yet powerful, carrying a sense of warmth and honesty. The audience listened intently, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. The pianist felt a deep connection with each note, each pause, each chord. For the first time, he played with complete awareness, embracing both skill and emotion. He realized that mastery of technique was no longer enough. He had to play with heart, to give life to each melody, to communicate something beyond himself. As the performance continued, the mysterious musician appeared once more, quietly taking a seat in the back of the hall. There was no fanfare, no announcement, simply a calm presence, a reminder of the journey that had brought the pianist to this moment. The pianist glanced briefly, feeling gratitude and quiet excitement. Their appearance was not a challenge this time, but a confirmation. He had begun to understand the deeper essence of music, the very lesson the mysterious figure had come to teach. The two pianos were not side by side now, but the influence of the mysterious musician could be felt. Every note the pianist played carried depth, vulnerability, and sincerity. He no longer sought to impress or dominate. He played to share, to express, to touch hearts. The audience, sensing the change, became silent, absorbed in the music. Tears glistened in some eyes, smiles appeared on others, and a sense of unity filled the hall. The pianist had discovered the power of humility and authenticity, and it shone through every chord. Midway through the performance, he took a bold risk. He improvised, allowing his emotions to guide him, moving beyond structured pieces into a realm where music spoke freely. Each phrase carried a story, each note expressed feeling. The mysterious musician nodded softly, approvingly, silently encouraging him to explore, to grow, to become one with the music. The pianist felt a sense of liberation, a freedom he had never known when he had focused solely on technical perfection. The audience was captivated. They did not need to understand every note, every chord. They felt it. The room seemed to vibrate with emotion, with energy, with the intangible magic of music that comes from the heart. The pianist realized that this was what he had been missing all along. Skill alone could inspire admiration, but authenticity inspired connection. The mysterious musician had opened his eyes, showing him that true greatness lies in humility, vulnerability, and the courage to express oneself fully. As the performance neared its end, the pianist played the final melody with a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. Every note was deliberate yet flowing, every pause meaningful, every chord alive with emotion. The audience held its breath, moved by the profound beauty of what they were hearing. When the last note faded into silence, there was a moment of stillness, a collective understanding that something extraordinary had been shared. Then, slowly, applause began, growing louder and more heartfelt with each passing second. The pianist looked toward the back of the hall, where the mysterious musician remained. Their eyes met, and a quiet exchange of understanding passed between them. No words were needed. The music had said everything. The pianist had been challenged, humbled, and inspired, and he had emerged transformed. He realized that this journey was not about proving who was the best, but about learning, growing, and sharing the beauty of music with the world. After the performance, the pianist spoke briefly to the audience. "Music is not about perfection or fame," he said, his voice calm and sincere. "It is about honesty, connection, and courage. It is about allowing ourselves to feel, to express, and to share something that touches hearts. I have learned that humility is not weakness, but a path to true artistry." The audience responded with standing ovations, not just for his skill, but for the sincerity and depth of his words and performance. In the following days, the pianist continued to play, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the music itself. His performances became even more moving, more engaging, more alive. Audiences were captivated not just by his technical mastery, but by the emotion and authenticity he conveyed. The mysterious musician never appeared on stage again, but their presence remained in his heart, guiding him, reminding him of the lessons learned. Humility, honesty, and the courage to express the truth of the heart. The pianist understood that being the best was no longer about titles or accolades. It was about the journey, the growth, the ability to connect with others through music. He realized that every performance, every note, every pause was an opportunity to touch lives, to inspire, to share something that could not be measured by skill alone. The mysterious tune that had once humbled him had transformed his entire approach, teaching him that true greatness comes not from mastery, but from heart. He continued to play, each day discovering new depths, new emotions, and new ways to communicate through music. His fame remained, but it no longer defined him. What mattered was the connection he felt with the music and with the audience, the joy of expressing truth through sound. The mysterious musician had given him a gift that would last a lifetime, and he honored it every time he sat at the piano. Years later, people would remember him not only as a technically brilliant pianist but as an artist who had learned the true meaning of music. They would speak of the performances that moved souls, of the melodies that seemed to carry life itself. And though the mysterious musician remained a quiet presence in memory, their influence shaped every note he played. The pianist had begun as the best alive in skill alone, but he became truly great in heart, humility, and the courage to let music speak for itself. In the end, he understood the most important lesson of all. Being the best is not about proving yourself to the world. It is about discovering the depth within yourself, sharing it honestly, and allowing music to guide you. Every note, every chord, every pause became an expression of life, a bridge to connect with others, and a reminder that the journey of growth and humility never truly ends. The mysterious tune had humbled him completely, but in doing so, it had made him whole.